Morning light spilled through the tall windows of the Jefferson City Courthouse, cutting pale stripes across marble floors that had seen more judgment than mercy. The building hummed the way big city courthouses always do, clerks rustling files, lawyers packing phone calls, shoes echoing in marble corridors. At 8:15 a.m., a woman stepped through the metal detectors. She was in her early 40s, composed, understated elegance. Charcoal skirt suit, neat bun, small leather case in one hand. Dr. Alicia Monroe. To anyone watching, she looked like another professional on her way to a hearing. The security line dragged. Two uniformed court officers, both veterans of long days and short patience, were chatting about coffee when she reached the front. "ID, ma'am," one said, not looking up. She handed over a simple black wallet. "Purpose of visit?" "Courtroom 3B. Defendant or witness?" His tone was casual, automatic. She hesitated, not out of offense but habit. She'd been asked that question more times than she could count. "I'm here for the 9 o'clock session." The younger officer, leaning against the desk, smirked. "Then you're early. Most folks' fighting tickets don't show till they're called." Alicia's eyes flicked to the brass plaque behind them. Professionalism is respect. She smiled faintly. "I'm not here for a ticket." He waved her toward the public seating area. "You can wait over there till they call your name." She started to answer but stopped. Years of experience told her not to waste breath explaining authority to people who were sure they understood the hierarchy of this place. She walked to the benches along the wall, placed her case on her lap, and waited. Around her, the courthouse moved in its daily rhythm. Public defenders with coffee-stained folders, defendants whispering prayers, a janitor polishing brass rails. The sound of a gavel from another room rolled through the hall like distant thunder. The older officer glanced over again. "Ma'am, no phones in the courtroom, okay?" "Understood." "And no food, no drinks. You'll be called soon." He meant well, perhaps, but his tone carried that blend of routine authority and unexamined bias that so often filled these halls. When Attorney Lopez, a young defense lawyer, arrived moments later, he greeted Alicia with a respectful nod. "Morning, Judge Moan." She lifted a hand slightly, silencing him with a small smile. "Good morning, counselor. Let's keep that between us till we're inside." Lopez caught on instantly. "Of course." The officers noticed the exchange but didn't quite register it. They went back to paperwork, laughing at a meme one of them scrolled through on his phone. At 8:45, the bailiff stepped out from courtroom 3B, voice carrying over the crowd. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Alicia Monroe." The hallway froze, papers stopped rustling, chairs creaked as people scrambled to stand. The two officers looked up, confused, eyes darting between the bailiff and the woman they just sent to the benches. Alicia rose calmly, smoothing her jacket. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then realization rippled through the room like heat. She walked past them without a word, heels soft against the marble. The younger officer straightened, face draining of color. The older one opened his mouth, then shut it again. At the doorway she paused, turned slightly, and spoke in a tone so even it stung. "Gentlemen, thank you for keeping order this morning." Nothing more. No anger, no triumph, just grace under the weight of revelation. Inside, the courtroom filled with murmurs that died the instant she took her seat behind the bench. She adjusted her microphone, looked out over the assembled lawyers and defendants, and tapped her gavel once. "Good morning, this court is now in session." The same officers stood at attention near the door, their posture suddenly rigid, respect now carved into their silence. Alicia began the docket, her voice calm and precise. Yet beneath that composure lay a deeper pulse, the awareness that dignity had just taught its own lesson in the most public way possible. No lecture could have done what silence had just accomplished. Outside the courtroom, whispers spread through the halls. turning into stories that would reach offices, news desks, and dinner tables before the day was done. The courtroom had that heavy morning stillness that comes after surprise. Every cough sounded louder, every paper rustle sharper. The two officers who had questioned her at the entrance now stood near the door, suddenly aware of their breathing. Judge Alicia Monroe lifted the first case file from the stack. Case 2147, State of Missouri versus Grant Peterson, she said evenly. Counsel, are you ready to proceed? A young assistant prosecutor sprang up, half stammering. Yes, Your Honor. The defense attorney, older, smoother, gave a polite nod. Ready, Your Honor. Alicia glanced at the defendant, a nervous 20-something man twisting a cap in his hands. Mr. Peterson, you're charged with trespassing and resisting arrest. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, he whispered. Very well, she said. Let's hear from the state. As the prosecutor outlined the facts, Alicia's attention drifted, not away from the case but toward the edges of the room. The way the gallery leaned forward, curious about the new judge, the whisper of pens scratching, the embarrassed stiffness of the officers. Her courtroom now carried two trials, the one on record and the silent one of perception. Your Honor, the prosecutor's voice pulled her back. Yes, Mr. Klein. He cleared his throat. I just wanted to thank the court for convening so promptly this morning. Alicia's expression didn't change. We start on time here, counselor. Please continue. The defense rose for cross-examination. Officer Miller, you claim my client refused to identify himself. Did you give him a chance to explain why he was on the property? The officer shifted on the stand. Alicia recognized him, the same one who told her to sit on the bench outside. Answer the question, officer, she said quietly. He swallowed. No, ma'am, I mean, Your Honor, we didn't think it was necessary. Thinking and procedure are not always the same thing, she said. You'll confine yourself to procedure in this courtroom. The defense attorney almost smiled. The prosecutor pretended to adjust papers. The gallery sensed the current changing direction. For the next 20 minutes, the hearing unfolded like a lesson in civility. Alicia's questions were calm but exacting. Each time an attorney interrupted, she waited until the silence itself demanded apology. Each time a witness hedged, she simply repeated the question until the truth came out. Her tone never rose. The weight of her composure did all the work. When the defendant's testimony concluded, Alicia leaned back slightly. Counsel approach. Both lawyers stepped to the bench. She lowered her voice just enough for the microphones to miss it. I don't appreciate posturing in this room. You will treat witnesses and each other with respect. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. She nodded, tapped the gavel once. We'll recess for 10 minutes. The moment she stood, the officers by the door moved automatically to escort her to chambers. She turned her head toward them, not coldly, just measured. That won't be necessary, gentlemen. I know the way. They froze, unsure whether to apologize. She gave them a small nod that meant, we'll talk when the docket allows. In chambers, sunlight cut across framed degrees on the wall, Howard University, Columbia Law. A single photograph of her late father sat on the desk, him in his postal uniform, smiling. She exhaled slowly, hands flat on the wood. Calm, centered. A soft knock. Come in, she said. It was Bailiff Daniels, a middle-aged black man who'd served this courthouse 20 years. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, he paused, choosing the right words. We've needed this for a long time. Alicia met his eyes. Needed what? Someone who doesn't lose her cool when folks show theirs. She smiled. Cool isn't free, Daniels. Costs years of learning when to speak. He chuckled. Well, it's paying dividends out there. She straightened the files. Let's make sure it keeps paying in the record. 10 minutes later, the session resumed. The air felt different, cooler, quieter, expectant. The officers stood behind the last row, still uneasy. Alicia addressed the room. Before we continue, I want to remind everyone that the court is not a stage. It's a forum for truth. Truth doesn't need applause. Then she turned to the prosecutor. Proceed with your next witness. As testimony resumed, every exchange carried double meaning. When an attorney spoke too fast, she raised a hand. Slow down. The record can't reflect what it can't hear. When a witness hesitated out of fear, she softened her tone. Take your time. You're under oath, not under threat. Bit by bit, order returned. Not the forced kind built on power, but the genuine kind built on respect. Even the officers began to relax, realizing the safest posture in her courtroom was honesty. By noon, the docket was cleared. Alicia delivered her decision, firm, reasoned, perfectly balanced. Mr. Peterson, the charge of resisting arrest is dismissed. On the count of trespassing, you're ordered to complete 20 hours of community service. This court believes in accountability and opportunity, not humiliation. Case closed. The gavel struck once, final, precise. People exhaled. The tension melted into murmurs. The defendant blinked tears of relief. Lawyers nodded respectfully. The officers exchanged glances, chastened but wiser. Alicia gathered her notes, stood, and looked across the courtroom one last time. Court is adjourned. The entire room rose, not out of fear, out of recognition. Respect had been retaught in real time. When the gavel fell, most people didn't rush for the door. They lingered, whispering, glancing back at the bench as if unsure what they'd just witnessed. Judge Monroe stacked the files, took one slow breath, and stepped down from the platform. Her heels clicked against the marble like a metronome marking calm in a room still holding its breath. The younger officer, the one who told her to wait her turn, straightened as she approached. His face was red, posture stiff. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, about earlier, She raised a hand, stopping him gently. Don't apologize to me to ease your conscience. Just remember me next time you think you know who someone is. He blinked, then nodded, words caught somewhere between shame and understanding. Yes, ma'am, yes, Your Honor. Her gaze softened just a fraction. It's all right, officer. Learning's part of the job, yours and mine. The older officer, standing beside him, gave a quiet nod. We got the message, ma'am. She offered a brief smile, one corner of her mouth lifting. Good, court's a good place to listen. She turned and walked toward her chambers. The hallway filled again with motion, reporters whispering to interns, lawyers trading glances. Nobody dared say it aloud, but everyone knew. The story of the morning had already left the room. In her chambers, sunlight slanted across stacks of case files. The air smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Alicia set her robe on the hook, rolled her shoulders, and let out a quiet sigh. The door creaked open. It was Attorney Lopez, the young defense lawyer from earlier. Your Honor, I just wanted to say that was something. She arched a brow. Something good, I hope. Best lesson I've seen in years. Half the folks out there still look like they saw a ghost. Alicia chuckled softly. Respect's not dead, counselor, just been neglected. Lopez laughed. Well, you just resurrected it. Guess I'll let you get back to work. Take care, Mr. Lopez. When he left, she leaned back in her chair, looking up at the ceiling's ornate trim, the kind that made the courthouse feel more like a cathedral. Her inner voice was quiet, measured. You didn't have to raise your voice. You just had to stand where they never imagined you stand. Outside, the buzz was growing louder. A local news reporter was setting up by the courthouse steps. A camera light flicked on. By mid-afternoon, word had spread beyond the walls. A bailiff stopped by her door with a sheepish grin. Ma'am, you're trending in the break room. Alicia frowned, half amused. I'd rather trend in the appellate reports. Too late for that, he said, chuckling. Somebody saw the whole thing go down in the hallway this morning. Folks can't stop talking about it." She shook her head. "Let them talk. Maybe they'll remember it next time they size someone up." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Still, it's about time they saw something like that in this place." Around 4 o'clock, she left chambers and stepped outside into the crisp city air. The courthouse plaza bustled with the usual afternoon rush, attorneys hustling to parking lots, public defenders carrying files bigger than their paychecks, pigeons diving for crumbs between marble tiles. As Alicia reached the steps, a reporter called out, "Judge Monroe, is it true you were mistaken for a defendant this morning?" She paused, lips pressing together. The camera's red light blinked at her. "I don't comment on courthouse rumors," she said. "But is it true you were?" She turned slightly toward the reporter. "What's true," she said evenly, "is that this courthouse runs on justice, not assumptions. That's all I'll say." The reporter hesitated, then lowered the mic. "Understood, Your Honor." Alicia smiled faintly. "Good, now write that down correctly." She descended the steps, every step deliberate, her presence commanding without effort. The crowd parted naturally, not out of fear, but the kind of respect that silence brings when it finally learns its place. Back inside in the officer's lounge, the younger cop sat with a paper cup of coffee, staring at the tiled floor. "Man," he muttered, "I can't believe I told her to wait." The older one shrugged. "You weren't the first, won't be the last." Still, that look she gave me, it wasn't mad, you know, more like disappointed. "Yeah," the older one said, "that's the kind that sticks longer than a shout." He took a sip. "Guess we both needed the reminder." Evening settled over the courthouse, lights dimming as janitors began their rounds. Alicia sat at her desk, finishing notes for tomorrow's docket. The building had gone mostly quiet except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clatter of carts on tile. She looked again at her father's photo. "You'd laugh at me if you saw the headlines today," she murmured. In her mind, she heard his old saying, "Respect ain't given, baby girl, you show it till they can't ignore it." She smiled softly. "Guess you were right again, Daddy." Her phone buzzed, a message from the chief administrative judge. "Heard about this morning. Handled with class as always. Proud of you." She set the phone down and leaned back, eyes closing for a long moment. The day had been heavy, but it had ended with something she valued more than praise: clarity. When she finally stood to leave, she flicked off the desk lamp. The city lights outside gleamed through the window, reflections of a world still learning how to see clearly. As she walked out, her heels echoed again through the empty hallway, steady and sure. One of the janitors, pushing a mop bucket, looked up and smiled. "Evenin', Judge." Alicia nodded. "Evening, you good." "Can't complain, ma'am. Folks been talkin' 'bout you all day." She chuckled. "Let 'em talk, just make sure they spell my name right." He grinned. "Yes, ma'am." She gave a friendly nod and continued toward the exit. Outside, a breeze moved through the courthouse steps, carrying with it the last hum of city traffic and the quiet pride of a woman who turned insult into instruction. Alicia paused at the top of the stairs, looking out at the skyline. The courthouse behind her glowed faintly gold in the streetlights. Some lessons don't need to be shouted, she thought. Some are written in how you walk away. And with that, she walked down the steps, head high, steady stride, the embodiment of justice that didn't need an introduction anymore. Morning sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, stripping the kitchen table in gold. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the silence with a slow rhythm. Judge Alicia Monroe sat in her robe, a folded newspaper resting beside a steaming mug. The front page showed a still photo of her standing behind the bench, eyes calm, gavel raised. The headline read, "Unexpected Lesson in Justice Shakes Jefferson City Courthouse." She exhaled, long and quiet. The city outside was just waking, horns in the distance, kids shouting at a bus stop, a dog barking somewhere down the block. The normal world kept moving while hers had tilted a few degrees overnight. The radio hummed on low volume. A morning host's voice floated across the room. If you missed it yesterday, a clip, been circulating online, shows two officers being corrected by Judge Alicia Monroe after mistaking her for a defendant. Folks are calling it a masterclass in grace. Alicia reached over, turned the dial a notch lower. The last thing she wanted was to be anyone's trending topic. She took a sip of coffee, staring at the photo again. Her father's words echoed faintly in her mind. Respect ain't free, baby girl. You teach it every day you show up. She smiled, but the smile was tired. By 8:30 she was back at the courthouse. The marble steps gleamed from the early cleaning. The revolving doors hissed quietly. Inside, conversations dropped to whispers as she passed. A few staff members nodded a little too quickly. One young clerk mouthed "Good morning, Judge," with an almost shy smile. Alicia gave a polite nod. "Morning, y'all." When she reached her chambers, a small bouquet sat on her desk. No card, just lilies and a folded note that read, "Thank you for reminding us what this building stands for." She touched the petals, then set the note aside. The knock at her door was light. "Come in," she said. It was Officer Miller, the younger guard from the entrance, hat in hand. His partner stood just behind him. Both looked uncomfortable in the doorway. "Your Honor, we wanted to say we're sorry, publicly if you'd prefer." Alicia gestured to the chairs. "Sit down." They obeyed, hats resting on their knees. Miller fidgeted with the brim. "Ma'am, we see hundreds of folks every morning. Guess we stopped seeing people, you know. Yesterday, well, you showed us." Alicia folded her hands. "What you said then, that wasn't the first time I've heard it. Won't be the last, but what matters is what you do next." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We'll do better." She nodded slowly. "That's all I can ask." They stood to leave, relief washing across their faces. As the door closed, Alicia let her shoulders drop just for a second. Being the example gets heavy, she thought, but somebody's got to carry it. At 10, a summons arrived from the chief administrative judge, Harold Baines. He was waiting in his office, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a voice built for radio. "Alicia, come on in. Quite the week you're having." She took a seat. "Seems that way." He slid a printout across the desk. Local outlets, national blog, even a late-night show mentioned it. "You've become the face of decorum overnight." She looked down at the paper, screenshots, quotes, her expression froze in mid-sentence. "That wasn't the goal." "I know, but optics are optics." He leaned back. "The mayor's office called. They're proud, but they'd rather not see racial tension attached to courthouse headlines. You follow?" Her jaw tightened. "I follow." "Good, just keep things steady. No interviews, no statements, let it fade." She nodded once, understood. As she stood to leave, he softened. "For what it's worth, Judge Monroe, you handled it with class. Some of us could learn from that." "Thank you, sir," she said, then stepped out into the hallway where every echo seemed louder than usual. By lunch, the clip had aired on 3 news stations. In the cafeteria, a bailiff played it on his phone for a group of clerks. "Look at her face right there. That's the moment they realize." The table burst into quiet laughter, pride more than mockery. "She didn't even raise her voice," someone said. "That's how you do it." Alicia passed by unnoticed, hearing every word. She smiled to herself and kept walking. Outside the courthouse, a reporter called out again. "Judge Monroe, just a quick comment for Channel 6. She shook her head, polite but firm. "Courtroom speaks for itself." The reporter grinned. "Fair enough, Judge." The wind picked up, fluttering papers across the plaza. She caught one, an editorial printout from a local columnist titled "Dignity on the Bench, a Lesson for Us All." She folded it neatly, slipped it into her bag. That evening her phone buzzed nonstop, colleagues texting congratulations, old classmates sending emojis of applause. She muted it and drove home through the dusky streets. The skyline glowed amber. The courthouse behind her looked almost peaceful again. At home, she changed into sweats, poured a glass of water, and sat on the couch. The TV flickered through headlines. One anchor said, "In an age of outrage, Judge Alicia Monroe showed what restraint looks like. Viewers nationwide are calling her the calm in the storm." She clicked it off. Silence again. For the first time all day, she felt the weight hit her chest, a mix of pride, sadness, and bone-deep fatigue. Her phone rang. The caller ID read Judge Naomi Ellis, retired mentor and friend. "You holding up, baby?" Naomi's voice was warm, honey-smooth. "Trying to," Alicia said. "They love you out there. You're trending for all the right reasons." "Maybe, but I didn't do it for applause." "I know that, but sometimes God uses the moment you didn't plan to make the point folks needed." Alicia leaned back, eyes closed. "I just wish it didn't always take something like this for people to notice competence." "That's the weariness talking," Naomi said gently. "Take a breath. Let them learn you already did your part." They sat in companionable silence for a few beats, the kind that says everything words can't. "Get some rest, Alicia," Naomi added. "Tomorrow's another day to prove them wrong without even trying." Alicia smiled faintly. "Night, Judge." The next morning, the courthouse lobby buzzed with new energy. The same marble that had witnessed humiliation now echoed with softer tones. "Morning, Judge. Coffee's fresh, ma'am. Glad you're here." None of it felt fake. It felt like people trying to be better. As she walked toward her courtroom, she passed the officers again. They stood straighter, greeting every visitor with genuine courtesy. She didn't need to say a thing. That was lesson enough. Upstairs, a group of young law clerks huddled around a tablet. One, a black woman barely out of school, looked up as Alicia passed. "Judge Monroe, we just wanted to say thank you. My mama called me crying last night after she saw you on TV. She said, 'That's what grace looks like, baby.'" Alicia paused, emotion flickering in her eyes. "Tell your mama I said she raised a good one." The clerk grinned, cheeks glowing. "Yes, ma'am." Alicia walked into courtroom 3B, the place that had changed everything. She set down her briefcase, smoothed her robe, and looked out across the rows of seats now filled with quiet respect. The bailiff called, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Alicia Monroe." As she took the bench, the hush felt different, not the tense silence of shock but the grounded quiet of recognition. She looked down at her docket, then up at the courtroom. "Good morning," she said, voice steady. "Let's get to work." Her gavel tapped once, sharp and clean. Outside those walls, people would keep talking, posting, debating, but inside order reigned. And somewhere deep beneath the marble floors, respect, the real kind, the lasting kind, had finally taken root. A week had passed since the morning that changed everything. To Alicia, it felt both longer and shorter, like time had stretched and folded around her name. Jefferson City Courthouse was busier than ever. Camera crews still lingered by the front steps, hopping for another quote, another headline. She gave them none. Her silence had become its own statement. Inside, the staff had adjusted, but the air carried something new, not tension exactly, but awareness. The officers at security now greeted each person with measured politeness. "Morning, sir. Morning, ma'am. You good?" It wasn't fear driving it. It was memory. The courthouse had learned something the hard way. At her desk, Alicia sifted through a stack of letters and emails printed out by her clerk. Most were simple notes of thanks. "You reminded me to stand tall at work today." "My daughter saw you on TV. She wants to be a judge someday." "That silence of yours, that's the sound of power." She smiled faintly at that last one, then set them aside. Flattery was nice, but it also made her uneasy. She hadn't meant to be anyone's hero. She just wanted to start court on time. The phone buzzed. "Judge Monroe," said her clerk. "The State Judicial Council wants to schedule a media briefing. They'd like you to speak about professionalism and bias next week." Alicia sighed softly. "Of course they do. You want me to confirm?" "Yes, let's just keep it short." That evening she drove home under a low, gray sky. The radio was tuned to a local talk show. "And some say Judge Monroe's restraint was more effective than any protest could be," the host said. "Yeah," another voice chimed in. "But think about what it means that it took a viral clip for folks to pay attention." "Fair point," the host agreed. "Maybe the lesson ain't just about grace, it's about what we notice too late." Alicia turned the radio off. The quiet inside the car felt heavier than the traffic noise outside. They're not wrong, she thought. 2 days later, a formal memo arrived from the chief administrative judge, requesting her attendance at a closed-door meeting. The heading read, "Courthouse Incident, Public Relations Debrief." When she entered the conference room, 3 people were already seated: Chief Judge Baines, a communications officer, and a deputy from the mayor's office. A pot of coffee sat untouched in the center of the table. "Judge Monroe," Baines began, "we appreciate you coming in. We're here to discuss how to handle the ongoing attention." The mayor's representative leaned forward. "The city's proud of you, Judge. You've become a symbol of integrity, but understandably there's tension. The police guild's leadership isn't thrilled." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Because I didn't shout." "Because they feel embarrassed," Baines said quietly. "Some officers are calling for a statement clarifying that you harbor no resentment." She folded her hands. "You want me to apologize for being disrespected politely?" Silence filled the room. The PR officer shifted in his seat. "Not apologize, Judge, just ease the narrative. Optics matter." Alicia looked out the window at the city skyline, its glass buildings gleaming in late afternoon sun. "Optics always matter more than behavior, don't they?" Baines sighed. "I know this isn't fair, but your voice carries weight right now." She turned back, eyes calm but unflinching. "Then let it carry truth. I'll attend your briefing, but I'm not here to comfort guilt. I'm here to remind people what justice looks like." The mayor's aide hesitated, then nodded slowly. "That's fair, Judge." She stood. "Good, then we're done here." By the time she left the courthouse, the sky had darkened to navy blue. Reporters were still waiting outside, microphones ready. "Judge Monroe, any comment on your meeting with city officials? Will you be addressing the controversy at tomorrow's event?" She walked past without breaking stride. "Good night, folks," she said simply and kept moving. The clip of that line aired on every local station that night, captioned, "Judge Monroe stays silent again." The next day, the Judicial Council press briefing took place in the grand rotunda of the courthouse, marble columns, microphones lined up, cameras flashing. Alicia stepped to the podium in a navy suit, no robe this time. Her voice carried with steady grace. "I've been asked to speak about an event that, by now, many of you have seen. What happened wasn't unique, not in this courthouse, not in any workplace. What matters isn't embarrassment. What matters is growth." She paused, letting silence breathe. The crowd leaned in. "This courthouse stands for the rule of law, and law without respect isn't justice, it's just noise." I won't dwell on who said what that morning. I'll say only this: dignity is a two-way street. It starts with how we look at one another. The room was still. Cameras clicked, but nobody interrupted. "I thank those who have reached out with kind words, but the real work isn't in praise, it's in change. Let's get back to work." She stepped away from the podium, leaving reporters speechless. The clip went viral within hours. Respect in silence trended for 2 straight days. Later that week, the Police Guild announced new courthouse training on bias and public interaction. The memo credited recent events highlighting the importance of professional courtesy. No names mentioned, but everyone knew whose example started it. The same officers who'd once looked through her now greeted every visitor with a kind of humble precision. "Morning, ma'am. Good to see you again, sir." The tone had changed, not performative, just mindful. Alicia noticed it every morning and nodded quietly to herself. Progress didn't roar, it whispered. That Friday, as she prepared to leave for the weekend, a young clerk appeared at her door. It was the same woman who'd thanked her earlier. She held a folded newspaper. "Thought you might want a copy, Judge. They ran an op-ed about you in the Post." Alicia took it, scanning the headline. "The Gavel and the Mirror: How One Judge Made a City Rethink Respect." The article described how small moments, a nod, a tone, a pause, could reveal the state of a society. It ended with a line that stayed with her. "Sometimes the most powerful ruling isn't a verdict, it's composure." She folded the paper neatly. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said softly. As the clerk turned to go, Alicia added, "And hey, don't let this city change your smile." The young woman grinned. "Yes, ma'am." That night, Alicia sat on her balcony overlooking the city. The hum of traffic blended with crickets and the occasional siren. She nursed a cup of tea, the glow of streetlights painting gold reflections on the window pane. Her mind wandered back to that first morning, the way the officer's voice had sounded when he asked, "Defendant or witness?" The way the crowd had gone silent when her name was called. It had only been a moment, but it had rippled into something larger than she'd ever planned. She took a slow breath and whispered to herself, "Justice isn't always a verdict, sometimes it's a mirror." Her phone buzzed again, another message from Chief Baines. "Police Guild officially requested to meet and apologize publicly. You were right, change begins small." Alicia smiled faintly. About time, she thought. The following Monday, a formal event was held at the courthouse rotunda. Reporters packed the upper gallery. Officer Miller stepped to the microphone, hands trembling slightly. "Judge Monroe," he began, voice steady but humble, "on behalf of the Courthouse Security Division, we want to publicly acknowledge and apologize for how we treated you that morning. You showed us more grace than we deserved. We've learned from it and will keep learning." Applause filled the room, quiet, respectful. Alicia nodded in acknowledgement, then took the microphone. "Officer Miller," she said, "I appreciate your words, but what matters most is what you just did: own the mistake out loud. That's accountability and it's rare. I accept your apology." The applause grew louder, echoing against the marble walls. When she left the podium, the crowd parted again, not because she was trending, but because she was respected. Truly this time. That evening she returned to her empty chambers. The flowers had wilted, the news vans had gone. Only the quiet hum of the city remained. She opened her journal, something she rarely had time for, and wrote a single line. "Justice isn't noise, it's the silence that follows truth." She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle. Outside, Jefferson City moved through another night, slower now, a little more thoughtful. Somewhere in that stillness, respect had stopped being a headline and started becoming habit. The courthouse slept. At midnight, its marble steps caught the faint glow of street lamps. The flag above it hung still, no wind left to move it. Judge Alicia Monroe stood alone in the corridor outside her chambers. The day's hearings were long done, the crowds gone, the echoes faded. She could still feel the weight of every eye that had looked at her differently since that morning weeks ago. Some with pride, some with apology, some still measuring. She slid her hand along the cool marble wall, felt the history inside the stone. All this noise for one small act of restraint, she thought. All this change because I chose silence instead of fire. In her office, the lamp burned low. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights blink like slow-moving constellations. On the desk lay the week's headlines, each one carrying her name. She turned them face down. You ever get tired of being the example? The question came not from the room but from somewhere deeper, a whisper shaped by weariness. Her answer rose just as softly. Every day, but somebody's got to show what dignity looks like when folks forget. She opened her journal again. The last line she'd written still glowed faintly in the lamplight. Justice isn't noise, it's the silence that follows truth. Below it she added, and silence, when lived with grace, can shake a whole city awake. The next morning came early. Rain washed the courthouse steps, turning them silver. Alicia arrived before dawn as she always did. The lobby smelled of polish and coffee. The officers at security nodded. "Morning, Judge." "Morning, gentlemen. Y'all staying dry?" "Trying to." They shared a small laugh, a real one this time, and the day began. Inside Courtroom 3B, the lights hummed softly. She took her seat, robe settling over her shoulders like calm armor. The first case was minor, a noise complaint between neighbors, but even small disputes mattered here. As testimony began, she listened, asked questions, weighed truth and emotion like she always had. But something about the room felt lighter now. The air carried respect, not tension. People spoke to each other, not at each other. At recess, the young clerk approached. "Judge, they just approved that mentorship program you pitched, the one for underrepresented law students." Alicia looked up, surprised. "They did?" "Yes, ma'am, starts next semester. They named it after you." She blinked. "They didn't have to do that." "They wanted to. Said you gave the city a lesson worth teaching." Alicia smiled, warm and small. "Then let's make sure the lesson keeps learning." That evening, she left work a little later than usual. The rain had stopped. Puddles reflected the courthouse lights like mirrors on the ground. She paused halfway down the steps, breathing in the clean smell of asphalt and wet air. A stranger stood nearby, a middle-aged man in a faded suit, holding an umbrella. He hesitated, then spoke. "Excuse me, Judge Monroe." "Yes." "My sister works security here. She told me what happened that day. Just wanted to say you changed how she talks about her job. Says she looks people in the eye now." Alicia's smile reached her eyes. "Tell her that means the world to me." "Will do, ma'am, thank you." He tipped his umbrella and walked off into the night. She watched him go, then looked up at the courthouse again. For years it had been a place of judgment. Tonight it looked more like a place of learning. Later at home, she sat on her porch with a blanket around her shoulders, listening to the rain return in a gentle drizzle. The neighborhood was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. She could smell the damp earth, hear the slow tap of drops against the railing. Her thoughts wandered to her father's old words, to Naomi's steady voice on the phone, to every unseen woman who had swallowed insult and turned it into strength. She whispered into the rain, "Some battles are won without raising your voice, only by standing tall." Lightning flashed somewhere far away, the sky rumbling its quiet agreement. She thought of the young clerks, the officers who now greeted every visitor with care, the countless faces who'd seen her story and recognized a piece of their own. The lesson had outgrown her now. It lived in others. A few days later, the courthouse held a small ceremony to unveil a plaque in the lobby. It read, "In recognition of Judge Alicia Monroe, whose grace reminded us that justice begins with respect." When the curtain dropped, the room applauded. Alicia gave a short nod, no speech. Words weren't needed. After the crowd dispersed, she stood before the plaque alone. Her reflection shimmered in the brass. She smiled at it, not proud, just peaceful. "They thought they were teaching me where I belonged," she thought. "Turns out I was teaching them the same thing." That night as she drove home, the city skyline glowed soft behind her. A jazz station played low on the radio, saxophone notes curling like smoke. Traffic lights flicked from green to amber, rain streaks blurring the windshield. She turned onto her street, parked, and sat for a moment before cutting the engine. "If you've ever been doubted or dismissed," she murmured, "this story's yours too." She looked straight ahead, voice calm and sure, as if speaking to every listener out there. "Don't waste breath proving who you are, just keep showing up. Let your silence speak for itself, because truth always finds its voice." A pause, the kind that lands deep. Hit like if you believe in quiet strength. The radio faded, and so did the sound of rain. The screen of her phone lit up one last time, a message from Naomi. "Proud of you, baby girl, keep walking tall." She smiled, slipped the phone into her purse, and stepped out into the cool night air. The camera of imagination pulled back. One woman, one city, one quiet revolution of respect. And then just the soft sound of her heels on wet pavement. No music, no applause. Only the echo of dignity walking home.